civilization cycle, interviews experts and individuals who understand the intensifying cycle of economic, societal, and government upheaval, so you can stay ahead of the changes in our world and keep your family safe. Fortunately for us, we can recognize that we're at the precipice, a point in history where we can all see the cycle changing. Where we go from here is up to us. So let's start the conversation, and welcome to the show.
Now, the problem is we're at the same point in history as when all the hominids were mixing, but this time it's from a technological elite. And it seems like they're about to exploit what makes us human, literally the human essence. They're trying to package into an algorithm to sell it back to us. That's funny. I retired 20 years ago, but I didn't get the retirement fund to go along with it. I just started working for myself, doing stuff. You know, when you say that, that's really scary if you look at this article right here. This says that more people are only paying the minimum payment as credit card balance rise. The revolving credit card balances hit $645 billion, representing 71% of total card balances. Now, if everybody were to go broke and stop paying their credit card bills, there's an additional $645 billion that wouldn't be in the circulation. So you can imagine that if different dominoes hit at the same time, people aren't going to be paying their bills because they're going to be buying food and they're going to be taking care of necessities. So they're going to keep paying that minimum amount as long as they can until they can't pay that. And $645 billion is a lot. That's more than what you just said, you know, was the
unrealized losses in our banking system.
And not only that, that's even more money than the losses that they're claiming from the fire. This is just money that people owe from buying things that they don't need. And, you know, when we were around Christmas, they were talking about another $10 billion of things that people were going to buy on credit. And you know that most of those things were unnecessary trinkets. They weren't buying, you know, storable foods. They weren't paying off their house for the future. They weren't trying to pay their car notes off. They weren't doing any of that. They were just buying junk because everyone's in this delusion that things can continue on the same way forever without ever changing. And if the weather is an indicator, that kind of just shows you one example of how things never stay the same. Never. They always change. Everything's inevitably going to end. And that includes all of these little cryptocurrencies that they just pop out that have no value behind them. So you got to stick with the ones that are actually backing up real value in the real world. And if you look at that guy, there's this guy that has side-by-side videos, I'm sure you've seen it, of him back in 2013 buying some Bitcoin and looking at the little graph, and I think it was like, I don't know, $13 or $14 or something like that, a Bitcoin. And then they fast forward, he's showing the same video after it went past $100,000. So if you could think about that guy is one happy dude right now because he stuck with it. He stayed through the, you know, the ups and downs. I'm sure he got excited several times when it was at 20, when it was at 30, when it was at 60, and he didn't sell, and then it dropped back down, and now it's way up. So maybe they're going to be using literally Bitcoin as the standard here in the United States, because despite these other countries saying they're going to pass laws to not use it, like I said before, they're privately still using it. they have their own backup currencies, Bitcoin, gold, silver.
Yeah, I have a number for you. 13 million is the valuation that they want to bring each Bitcoin to. Now, that was Michael Saylor's speech, and then a few others that also tagged along with that. He's like, if you sell your Bitcoin for 100,000 today, you're leaving 13 million on the table approximately. So take the number out to 13 million and do the math with it then. And then derivatize that through all the, BlackRock ETFs and everything else. You need to read the prospectus, the BlackRock prospectus. And I encourage you to watch Catherine Austin Fitz, the way that they broke down as they were reading through the prospectus. And that whole, we keep hearing global warming, but why are the advertising companies allowed to still try to sell us two of something? If it was something that was a real threat, all global shipping would have stopped by now. Because you know what they did with asbestos and with chlorofluorocarbons and things. Leaded paint, leaded gasoline, for example. It stopped. It truly stopped. But we have airplanes now where you can get a $69 flight. There's more airplanes flying around the skies than ever. And these criminal advertising agencies allowed to sell you two of something. Buy one, no, buy two, buy three. It's Christmas. You have to buy for your loved ones. But wait, global warming. Oh, we got to, so this mixed messaging, sometimes when you watch a YouTube video, they would have the preceding video that would show would be, oh, the Arctic's melting, you got to think. And then it would be a whole company doing something, then followed directly by those two advertisements in a row, followed by something that's on sale. You can buy two now. And I wish I could have recorded a few more of those. Where that first message was the world's ending, global warming. And then the very, very next advertisement was buy two cars. That needs to stop too. If we're into this world where something is going drastically wrong, but I'll agree with you on the food. Like if food stops from Mexico, so just 2 points here. California produces an enormous amount of food. Now you might think, well, those fires aren't out in the vineyards or they're not out in the plantations and they're not out on the farms. True. But those loading centers, those consolidation centers where all that goes to, those were all in the fires. And then, Ransom, you could probably tell me more about the food coming from Mexico. I'm curious. So like if we were going to get cut off for a minute from Mexico, we're looking at least 30-40% reduction in food supply chains right now. There's going to be a lot of stranded food in the fields that'll never make it to market because there's just no refrigerated storage warehouses to put it in. There's just no warehouse. There's no storage and onward forwarding facilities. Those have been burned. So where does the food go? Right now they're at a sort of a real standstill in California on food also. So tell me about the food in Mexico. I mean, you know far more about that. Let me hear it. Can I bend your ear for a couple minutes?
Well, I think the biggest problem they have is organized crime, which directly relates to the prices that we're getting. Now, I kind of think this is a weird idea, but mostly all of the same things that Mexico grows, we also grow in New Mexico, Arizona, and California in the little different grow zones. So I realized that there was a big fire and all of that, but that wasn't really where they grow the food. And another thing, even if it was, guess what's going to grow better next year after they have fields full of ash? Well, it's going to be all the crops they grow in California.
Ransom, before we go on the break here, just wanted to read off. Thank you for supporting us on civilizationcycle.com. Buy me a coffee. And if you consider whatever, how wild and how woo-woo it gets, how scientific it gets, the analysis, whatever form it takes that we go with the show. That's how our society evolved, was everybody questioning the current thesis of the day. Like we can't even do that anymore. You can't do that any longer. Like they're cooling the past from the 1930s. I came up with some great charts from the 1800s, 1880s, all the way to like 1940 with temperature charts showing you that massive spike in the 1930s and down again. They cooled the past to make it look as if it was a linear trend. Showing that chart, verboten also. It's just crazy how you can't even show previous scientific data because it doesn't jive with today's consensus, and they should be able to disprove it. But why is that such a dangerous chart to show? Those are the things I ask. This was a real comment that somebody sent in and said, hey, you flew over to Asia. Did you see the flag? Did you see any curvature on the planet? No, I didn't. I was only up at probably 35,000 feet. So I had a conversation with somebody that was kind of interesting, and they're like, "Hey, would you listen to this guy? Would you watch this guy's video about a flat Earth?" And I was like, "All right, man. If you provide the beer, I'll watch it with you." So anyway, I watched this video, and my take on it was, the world's not flat that we live. The only way it could possibly, the whole video, the way it could possibly true that, this and that and the other with the, like looking over the horizons and things. The only possible way I think it could be anywhere remotely close to what they're trying to explain that it's flat is our Earth is some 20 times larger than we've been told, and there's extra continents outside the ice wall of Antarctica. At that point, because you got to think about, if you were trying to get even at 60, 70, 100,000 feet on Jupiter, to look over the curvature of the horizon on Jupiter, that would be impossible. The planet's just so large. It's an unignited brown dwarf star. So if our Earth was, they tell us it's a certain size. If our Earth was 20 times larger and all of these continents outside the ice wall not available to us, the surf class living here, that would make more sense, because the higher you are, if there was such a more large object, it would appear to have no curvature on it. So that was my 2 cents worth, and thank you for the comment. Just trying to do two birds with one stone, rolling into the second hour. And anyway, Ransom, woo-woo time.
Actually, I thought we'd go the other direction from woo-woo. So I might make a little people mad with this. But as far as the flat Earth goes, that's like if a bacteria was living on a basketball and tried to look out at the little highest piece of rubber it could grow on, would it see a round basketball? And the answer is no. You got to remember perspective. We're so small. Even if you got the best camera that you could possibly get and you went up there, it'd look flat. Unless you were out into outer space, like pretty far away from the planet.
Hey, Ransom, would you be outside the Van Allen radiation belt at that point? Again,
no.
How does human go through the Van Allen radiation belt, or would you have to be 250 miles or lower?
That's a good question about no, you wouldn't have to go that far, I don't think. Well, this is the problem with calling anything a micronova off of our sun, is that they don't come off of yellow stars. They only come off white dwarf stars when they have a companion star sucking off energy, as they show, like kind of in this picture here. So those are both white dwarf stars, despite one looking yellow on here. And the micronova is when a blast of energy comes off the host star to the companion star. Now, there's a problem because we can't have one of those here because we're not a white dwarf, for one, and we don't have a companion star that close to the star. Now, what he might be talking about I don't know why he calls it a micronova. He didn't coin the name. I don't know why he's using it, but it doesn't fit in science. However, something close to what he's talking about is this, I don't know how you pronounce this, Mayak.
Solar proton.
Mayak?
Oh, Miyake.
Yeah, Miyake. All right, there we go. I didn't want to sound, like messed up on my accent there, but this is
with
something.
America and Gulf America, you got the Miyake.
Yeah, where we're at, we call it America. We're not Americans. The timing of the BCE thing, solar proton event, constrained to between 664 and 663 BC. So this is kind of still theoretical. But it explains all of the heavy isotopes and different things that might be on the surface, along with other phenomenon that could deposit it in the same way. Like 12,900 years ago, impacts would create these same isotopes from space. So this is more like what he's talking about. I don't really know. So I'm not worried about a micronova because for A, we're not a white dwarf, and B, you need a companion star to produce that. But our sun does burp pretty large sometimes, right? And that's what they're talking about. The Carrington event was something little, and our infrastructure was basic at that time. Now, anything that's an X45 or above then now gives you the potential for problems as far as electricity. But the magnetic reversal, like we talked on the Tim show, we know that that's already happened. It's happened several times. It's trapped in lava. It's trapped in rock. We know the magnetic field changed. Now, what would that mean on Earth? You know, like what you're looking at, what would you physically see? I have a feeling that it would be all chaos, because you would have stuff coming in from the sun that would reach really far into our atmosphere, close to the ground. So we're talking speciation, mutation, etc. A lot of probably plasma from the high quartzite mountains, from Mount Everest to probably all these megalithic things that people built trying to reach the sky. So like if you lived in Machu Picchu, you might actually see a lot of lightning bolts coming off that main rock that's at the center of their thing that tells them when to farm on the terraces. So it has like a multi-function, but there's a reason that they thought that was something special there before they moved there. So I imagine it was some kind of event just like that. And you have to remember, from the Anwar province in Egypt all the way to like Cusco, you see evidence of vitrification on the stone coming from one direction or another. So whatever it was hot enough to melt the stone. And the only thing that I could possibly think of is one of these Miyake events that actually put solar plasma all the way down into the low Earth atmosphere because there was a magnetic field collapse. And then on top of that, you would have seen bugs, birds, whales, fish, bats, anything with magnetite or magnetic navigational, whatever they have that allows them to do that. A lot of people theorize humans also have something like that. But you would have seen massive chaos with the animals. So if that happened now, there's no telling what that would look like. There would be nomadic people and native people all over the planet in less industrialized areas where their food wasn't where it was supposed to be. And if you really think about that, that might have been the spark that made different kinds of hominids start moving around the planet. And we know there were bottlenecks in these genetics, from everything from Neanderthal to probably Denisovan, considering we haven't found much fossil record for them, but they are in our DNA. Which brings me to the DNA and the AI that you asked about earlier. Now, I've taken several of these, and no, they do not tell you the same thing. And the reason for that is because they have different AI programs, and how they judge your ethnicity or genetic background is through prediction and projection. So the AI projects what you are based on the other people that they've genetically tested. It's not like black and white. So if you were to get an accurate picture of your ancestry, you would have to take probably 3 different tests from 3 different companies. Or you could take one test, download it, and then upload it to the other services where they would give you different results. Like one of mine said that, well, one thing that they do that can tell you a lot of information that's not a speculation is your paternal and maternal haptypes and haplogroups, because that will tell you classically where your ancestors were, because they compare them to bodies of modern humans before history, prehistory. So Cro-Magnon, different things like that, they know what haptypes they were. And some of these, like, which is very interesting because it tells a totally different story than your recent DNA, which only tells you what maybe 8 generations back genetics are like and where they were at. So there's classic DNA, and then there's recent DNA. So ancestry.com will show you your recent DNA and your classic DNA, but they mix it up in a very convoluted way where it's hard to tell what it really means. So it'll just give you a geographical area. So according to them, I'm 50% Scottish, 10% Irish, like something original Britain, and so on. On the other one, it says different numbers. Like I took a different one. It said I was more Irish than Scottish. However, that one showed me the percentage of archaic DNA that I carry, which is really the whole key to everything. So when these AIs are scanning your genetics, what they're doing is they're looking for markers from different hominids, either Cro-Magnon, Neanderthal, Denisovan, or one of the various ghost species around the world that they don't want to teach people about, as well with the historical data. So like one site says classic DNA, I would be considered a third Roman, a third Greek, and a third Egyptian. That's right, from the Nile River. I know that makes some people mad. But when you consider that most of the people in the UK, about 70% of them share genetics with King Tutankhamun, that makes sense. And people forget that people migrate and they move. So 2,000 years ago is not going to be the same group of people as now, because people move around, people get conquered, the maps are redrawn, and people, they migrate all over the place. So you would have to take several DNA tests or share your DNA data upload with several different companies, and then you'll get a general picture of what it is. But if your DNA is more homogeneous, it's a lot easier for them to recognize. So this is weird. So one test says I'm 2% Spanish, and I'm wondering, do they mean Spain, Spanish? No, they mean classical DNA from that area in the Iberian Peninsula, which would be like Roman DNA. So it's really convoluted on what they're telling you. But the key to those things is the sales. So, for example, they might want to sell me a drug that helps me go to sleep because I have a Neanderthal gene that makes me a night owl. Although I'm from an area traditionally kind of, let's say, fair, pasty type people, I have a gene from Neanderthal that gives me dark skin. So I have a gene from a different hominid, and people forget that too, that each of these different hominid groups had an array of shades of skin. They have genes for dark, light. We know that Neanderthal had red hair, but they didn't have freckles. They had blonde, brown, and black hair also. So Cro-Magnon also had a range of those same things, from the skin tones to the hair color. But certain genes are from certain hominids. So like I have the gene for high altitude, and I can use little bits of oxygen because I have a gene from Denisovan that they theorize is why people in Tibet and all those other places can live at high altitudes and have no problem with it. They don't get hypoxia or nothing. But it's really weird because they're still teaching an out-of-date history of man that genetic science is totally disagreeing with now. So there wasn't this one linear branch of human evolution. In fact, there were probably up to 30 different types of humans, and even probably 20 all the way up to the end of the last ice age. They just found a site in China that insinuates that Denisovan may have been around as little as 5,000 years ago. There's people in Indonesia right now hunting down the Hobbit man because the local tribes say they still see them from time to time. And we know that was a real hominid. It's not a fairy tale. There's more proof of that than Bigfoot, right? We have bones, we have DNA from it. So we know it existed, and people are saying we're still seeing it in the jungle. So now there's a whole team of people out there looking around for something that once was a myth. Kind of like the panda bear, right? The panda was a myth, at least to Western people, for a long time. Teddy Roosevelt came in there with the hunting party, couldn't find it. The guy Lloyd Pye mentioned, did the panda do something weird to evade detection? No, it's a dumb creature who's sitting out there eating bamboo, doing its thing, being a panda. Then we found it, and then it wasn't a myth anymore. But yeah, so if you were relying on those DNA sites to tell you, one thing, it's probably going to tell you a lot of stuff, but it all revolves around the new technology that's unfolding to sell you based on your genetics. So like I was saying, you might have a Cro-Mag gene, which is basically the core species of humans, but you might have a specific gene that was replaced by one of the other hominids a long time ago. You could design drugs for a positive or negative outcome based on your archaic DNA. So like East Asians have up to 5% Neanderthal. Some East Asians have Denisovan, but China almost has none, which is very bizarre because they live right next to Koreans and Japanese. They do have a high content of Denisovan. And people in Australia, they have the highest content of Denisovan DNA, and ideologies of the past have lumped them together with other people around the world, even though they're not even related to them. So they don't teach people that there's multiple origins for phenotypes as far as your looks and appearance. So there's more than one origin for the white phenotype. There's more than one origin for the black phenotype. And they've already proven that humans didn't walk out of Africa and then mutate into all these different people, but instead there were people already in the other places, and people moved and then mixed, and here we are, the mutt species in the future. Now the problem is we're at the same point in history as when all the hominids were mixing, but this time it's from a technological elite. So now they're the ones with the keys to the kingdom, and it seems like they're about to exploit what makes us human, literally the human essence. They're trying to package into a algorithm to sell it back to us. And we're going into the era of designer humans. And you can tell that, like when you go to these websites, they're trying to sell you stuff to teach you about your traits, stuff to teach you about, like you said, what diet. And the truth is that that's going to be different for everybody around the world, depending on what their historical context and genetic contributions are. So like somebody in China is not going to be trying to drink a bunch of milk, right? Because there's a lot of lactose intolerant, because they know that came from a specific group of people that started farming and using dairy cattle and started eating milk and cheese. So there's a whole big portion of the world that is going to be tailor sold to, or in other words, the commercials, the advertisements. And you brought this up last time. You sit around and talk in your house, the phone and everything picks it up. Then they try to sell you stuff based on your own conversations. So like the other day, I was looking up the websites that do free DNA testing if you upload the file, and sure as it rains, I got advertisements from every single platform telling me which sites will do exactly that. And I mean, overwhelmingly, it was on my phone, it was on the tablet. I went to YouTube. The commercial on YouTube was that. It's a world that we're involved in that people don't see yet.
I myself am more interested in the archaic DNA test. So imagine if we don't have to think about if we were English or Egyptian or whatnot, Persian, don't care. I want to go 30,000 years into the past, because I think, just in my own analysis of, we both kind of dovetail in a lot of research. If you could know what the compliant or the non-compliant part of population is based on that archaic DNA, I mean, maybe there's a marker in there for Denisovan or Neanderthal, or people like me. I just want to do my own research. I don't care what narratives I hear in the media. I like to, double it down and take a look at my own research and see truly, is it true, is it not? Like maybe that's part of 5% of the population. If they can mark that, that's the 5% of the population they would definitely want to remove. They wouldn't want you having offspring. They wouldn't want that offspring, continuing down, because then if it's diluted, even if it's 1%, 2% of noncompliance, the brains are working differently in the way that we perceive information. And this has always been the goal for kings, queens, oligarchs, and, further back in the past, total compliance. If you think the Anunnaki were here, do you think they not wanted 1,000% total compliance? Like the barbarian and brutality of the stories of them, even if you looked at them, they would kill you instantly. Right. So coming back with the archaic DNA to have this mind that works differently than the compliant serf and slave population.